The character arc is arguably the most foundational element in writing fiction. The flaws and faults of characters are relatable, their struggles to persevere despite their failings edifying, and their eventual triumphs inspiring. Well-constructed arcs let us connect to the story, reflecting on how each decision the character made changed them, how their reactions to the world around them evolved as they progressed along their journey, and how we might imitate their growth in our own lives. From the story of Kratos, we might learn that forgiving yourself for your past sins is one of life's toughest and most necessary battles. Through the tale of Zuko, we might come to understand that honor and meaning cannot be defined by the whims of another person, even one's own father. As we journey with Hiccup, we might recognize that the wisdom required to lead can only be earned through hardship and sacrifice. All of these arcs are wonderfully enlightening, but does that mean that every character in a given story needs to change significantly, to evolve and grow over the course of the narrative? No, it does not. Some characters ought to be static and unchanging. This poses a challenge for the writer, as it is markedly more difficult to get audiences to connect with someone who lacks the inner turmoil and conflict that so often generates sympathy for our protagonists. So, how do we overcome that hurdle? How does one write a character whose motives, methods, and morals remain constant throughout the course of the story without evoking yawns or groans from the viewer? The answer to that question is naturally going to depend on the type of static character you are writing. In the case of this video, we will be examining the anti-hero, using Luthen Rael from Andor as our example. While most anti-hero protagonists, such as Matthew Murdock, aka Daredevil, will struggle with the morality of their actions and the temptation to justify evil means by their supposed necessity in pursuing admittedly noble ends, Luthen does not have any such qualms about his methodology, which brings us to the first of our 5 rules. Make him all in. It's obvious from one of Luthen's earliest scenes that he is fully committed to his cause. When Cassian sticks a blaster in his face demanding answers, Luthen doesn't flinch in the slightest.
Don't you want to fight these bastards for real?
This scene and the subsequent one where Luthen forces Vel to incorporate Cassian into their heist do an excellent job showing the audience Luthen's unassailable confidence, not only in the value of his cause, but in his own ability to achieve his goals. We don't need to hear him espouse his personal philosophy, not yet anyway. His actions make it clear that this is a man bound and determined to win his war his way. Okay, but why does this matter? Why is making someone all in on their given cause a good rule of thumb for writing a static anti-hero? Well, for one thing, because having this character who is set in his ways provides excellent contrast for other protagonists who are still developing, and because his assertiveness provides impetus for the plot. But those reasons will be covered in later rules. For the sake of rule number 1, the core reason is simple. Motivations do not come from nowhere. This is an understanding the viewer naturally comes to when he is first introduced to Luthen. One does not remain effortlessly calm with a blaster in one's face unless this particular experience is familiar territory. Luthen does, as we see late in Season 2, have a dramatic and traumatic history, which directly led to him becoming the rebel he is today. He was, quite simply, one of the bad guys, but he was also one of the rare ones who, at some point, realized he was a bad guy. The thing is, though, he accepted and embraced that identity. Luthen never really changed his ways, he just changed sides. Wait, so doesn't that mean he's not truly a static, unchanging character? Well, kind of, but not really. As far as the 5 years that make up Andor's timeline are concerned, Luthen is highly consistent in his character traits, motivations, and philosophy. The only major change to which we are privy happened more than a decade before the show's inciting incident. And I love that we were shown that flashback because, of course, Luthen comes from somewhere. Everyone has a character arc, but the story doesn't need to show us each and every one of those arcs. Naturally, we are going to meet characters who are at the end of their personal journeys. The writer must know where the characters came from, how they became the people they are now, even if the reader or viewer does not. That's a good rule for writing any static character, so naturally it applies to the anti-hero, who has gone through a significant, harrowing, and painful journey to reach the all-in mindset that defines him. This personal philosophy is, of course, best explored in the words of Luthen himself, when his undercover operative asks Luthen what he, the mastermind behind the scenes, sacrifices while his foot soldiers risk their necks on a daily basis.
I burn my decency for someone else's future.
This is a monologue I'm sure you've seen covered many times before. There's a decent chance you've watched my video talking about it, so I won't go into much detail here, but suffice it to say, this is brilliant. Luthen is set in his ways, seemingly incapable of change. He knows it, and he hates it, but he sees no other way, no other path to victory. So, he continues. He persists in using whatever cruel means he must to achieve his desired ends, knowing all the while that he is not justified in doing so, that his actions will cost him his very soul.
I'm damned for what I do.
That is why you have rule number 1. You cannot have an anti-hero who, having already reached the final point in his character arc, is anything less than fully committed to his chosen goals. That elevation of a given good to his highest good is what makes him an anti-hero, after all. There is no room for hesitation or doubt in such a character. Those are weaknesses that would have been expunged years ago. In order to have the strength of will to do what needs to be done, all cares aside from the cause must be discarded. And while this certainly makes for a fascinating character, it obviously does not leave a lot of room for growth, hence the necessity of rule number 2. Don't make him the main character. Now, there obviously are static character archetypes who can be your central protagonist, and we will talk about them in future videos, but the antihero is not a great candidate for such a role. I'm not saying you could never make it work. Skilled writers can pull off just about any trick they want. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're going to have an anti-hero who is set in his ways, your story will likely be better off spending most of its time exploring somebody else's journey. If your main character is an anti-hero, you have 2 options. 1, he should struggle with the morality of his choices, his desire to be better, and his conflicting conviction that this way is the only way to get things done. Example, Daredevil. Or 2, it shouldn't be a character-focused story. Brian from Taken is absolutely an anti-hero, despite him not really being portrayed as one, because the story just isn't about that. Nobody, not even him, takes a second to reflect on the morality of his actions. Rescuing his daughter is all that he and the movie care about. Andor is not such a story. The inner lives of its characters, how the characters view and judge themselves, is inseparable from the plot. Because, of course it is. It has to be. We know how this struggle of theirs will end. We've seen Rogue One. We've seen the original Star Wars. Victory is already assured. So in order to create tension in this story, Tony Gilroy and team needed to focus on smaller scale conflicts. Some between the Empire and the fledgling rebellion, sure, but the most poignant battles were fought within the minds of the men and women on screen. Cassian Andor goes from mercenary who just wants to escape the people chasing him to an inspirational leader who affects change when others were content to let their fate be decided for them.
It has to be you. Come on, kid.
Mon Mothma wrestled with the rebellion, which she'd been happy to finance from a distance, gradually demanding more and more from her until it was all she had left.
We'll be vulnerable forever. You need to be protected.
Cyril Karn started out as a well-intentioned, if overeager and naive force for what he believed to be justice and goodness, only to find his world turned upside down and chaos raging both within and all around him. All of those character arcs naturally create tension. We aren't sure how the characters we see now will become those whom we know from Rogue One and beyond, and that unknown keeps us invested. And in Cyril's case, we aren't at all sure what will become of him, though it wouldn't take an immense amount of brainpower to make an accurate guess. It would take even less gray matter to figure out Luthen's eventual fate, considering his absence in any property beyond Andor and his prominence within the rebellion. So even that sort of tension, if not completely removed, is substantially lessened. The protagonist, in a character drama anyway, ought to have an uncertain fate and undergo character growth during the course of his story. Luthen doesn't satisfy either of those conditions.
I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion.
Not everyone needs an arc, but neglecting to include that foundational brick of storytelling, especially in a Star Wars story, will hamper said narrative's ability to enlighten, inspire, and uplift. However, just because your static anti-hero cannot be the center of attention does not mean he has to be far from the mark. In fact, he should be quite close to it, especially in a story that centers around the protagonist's personal growth. The best use for your own version of Luthen, then, is rule number 3. Make him contrast with the hero. To cover this rule, I will turn the reins over to my friend James from the Storytellers Guild, who is a veritable expert on Andor analysis.
Luthen is further established as an anti-hero through his relationship with Cassian Andor, or rather, the ways in which he contrasts with Andor. While he is not a traditional hero, at least at first, Cassian Andor is the clear protagonist of the Andor series. Obviously, he's the titular character, and the show focuses particularly on his story. It follows his development from a dissatisfied member of the Imperial system into a rebel. And it also follows his transformation into a hero, something that's brought about by Luthen Rael. Cassian hates the Empire from the beginning, but Luthen challenges him to do something about it, to fight back against what he's called an oppressive government, to cast his thoughts beyond survival to freedom. And when Luthen meets Cassian, he admits as much.
I came looking for something more, and I think I found it. I'd like you to come with me.
He is there for Cassian, for his character, his potential, and his skills, not his loot. And Luthen, above all others, is the perfect one to kindle Cassian's fire. He is not a romantic, but a realist, and he pitches the rebellion to Cassian in the most realistic of terms. He targets Cassian's desire for vengeance, and of course, compensation.
You survive and deliver. I'll give you 200,000.
But between their meeting on the way to Aldhani in Season 1 and their meeting on the way from Gorman in Season 2, the dynamics between these two characters change entirely. By Season 2, it is Luthen who needs persuading, and Cassian who provides it. Cassian challenges him to pursue a higher goal, the preservation of the Gorman people from inevitable destruction. He compels him to choose heroism over victory. Luthen, on the other hand, wishes to use the Gorman uprising as a way to challenge the Empire, and he's unconcerned about the fate of the Gorman people, about their preparation, their funding, or their ability to fight back. To him, the Gorman uprising simply means the useful support of the rebellion from a powerful planet, and he does not care whether the people of Gorman perish or not. In fact, he's almost counting on it.
It will burn. Very brightly.
Now, it could be argued that Gorman was doomed anyway, but Luthen's approach to the situation is the approach of an anti-hero. He is concerned about the rebellion as a whole. He is willing to sacrifice the lives of the many for the lives of the many more. And despite being challenged by Cassian, the hero, he does not change his ways. Luthen's actions are defined by this utilitarianism, and I think it's what distinguishes him as a true anti-hero. When he sees an issue, he removes it. To Luthen, Tay Kolma and Lonnie Jung are the same, regardless of their disparate motives and causes. And he even considers taking the same approach with Bix. And the conflict around this issue once more stresses the growing contrast between Luthen and Cassian. Luthen identifies that her PTSD from torture and attempted assault by the Empire has left her broken, fearful, and ultimately helpless. Dead weight. And he also sees that her diminished state is weighing on Cassian.
All he does is sing your praises. We need you, Bix. We need you healthy.
But Cassian confronts Luthen about his interference in their relationship, even risking their whole operation to do so.
Very poor decision. You come to the house and you mess with Bix. You mess with her behind my back.
For Luthen, the rebellion is everything, and it's a game that must play out in a certain way. But Cassian holds a different view. The rebellion may be meticulously planned, but its lifeblood is still people. Warm bodies, living, breathing individuals who cannot be simply plugged into a machine, but must choose it. He believes that sacrifice, while noble, must be encouraged, not enforced. And it's the difference between Luthen desiring to get rid of Bix and Bix choosing to leave on her own. And it's a lesson I think Luthen never truly learns. See, Luthen's philosophy is not that different from the Empire. something that he willingly admits.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them.
And while hope is proclaimed as the core of the rebellion, Luthen's philosophy is in contrast to it. He is deterministic, set on a path he has accepted because he cannot change it.
I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space.
He is an anti-hero, chained by his own guilt, believing that the evil he commits is necessary. And where Luthen is concerned, the ultimate tragedy is, perhaps it is. Perhaps he is a necessary evil, a thematic representation of the horrors of war, a necessary step in the journey of both the rebellion and Cassian Andor himself. The anti-hero along the way.
James's last point there is the most important one. Perhaps Luthen is necessary. We could argue back and forth all day about whether or not such a war could be won without his unfortunate methods. But for the purpose of the show, there can be no doubt as to this one simple fact. Luthen matters. Rule number 4, make him matter. Luthen is undoubtedly the most powerful driving force behind Andor's plot. Your given antihero might not need to be quite so central to the story, but his choices and actions should very much matter. If you follow rule number 1 and he is all in, your Luthen is going to act decisively and confidently in a way that cannot help but urge the plot forward. It might seem as if this particular rule is so obvious as to be unhelpful. Of course, your static antihero should matter. Every character should matter. And yes, that is true. But I would suggest thinking of this character archetype almost as you would an unstoppable force of nature, albeit one with an intellect, a will, and, most importantly, a goal. What he chooses to do and the way in which he pursues his chosen ends are quite interesting, but what's most important for the other characters is that he does act. They cannot control or constrain him. They must simply react, must deal with the fallout. Luthen's fingerprints are all over each and every plotline in Andor. Cassian obviously would never have joined the rebellion if it weren't for Luthen's direct intervention.
Special people are hard to find. I didn't want to see you tossed on the pile.
Mon Mothma is only forced into her unfortunate situation because she helped bankroll Luthen's operation, and only dragged deeper in because Luthen refuses to lose her.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
How nice for you.
Dedra Meero, and by extension Cyril Karn, is motivated primarily by the desire to win this game of cat and mouse and capture Luthen.
Do you really think I care about how it happens?
And of course, the drama that envelops Gorman would, at the very least, not have reached quite so feverish a pitch if it were not for Luthen throwing kindling on the fire. Those episodes where we witness the climax of the Gorman storyline are where Andor utilizes Luthen in a sneakily brilliant fashion. It makes him disappear. During episodes 7 and 8 of Andor's second season, Luthen Rael does not appear on screen. Not once. All of this, the brilliant blaze of a planet, a people, thousands of innocents mowed down as the Empire is forced to overplay its hand, is his handiwork. But he's not there to witness it. He doesn't need to be. Luthen has always been the man pulling strings from behind the curtain. His complete absence from the show as its defining action unfolds, ironically, serves to emphasize just how impactful and important he has been in orchestrating everything. Your unchanging antihero does not need to be such a mastermind, but he absolutely should be instrumental in driving the plot forward and forcing the other characters to adapt as they move along their own respective arcs. Perhaps your character will operate from the front lines of his chosen conflict, a position we have not seen Luthen in since episode 3 of the first season. But as the series reaches its final arc, we find him once again thrust into the spotlight, as Dedra Meero closes the snare and provides us with rule number 5. No happy endings. Now, obviously, Luthen's story does have a happy ending, as the cause for which he fights, the rebellion that he helped build, proves victorious, not once but twice. And then everyone lives happily ever after with no further exploration of what happened to them after the Battle of Andor. But his personal story ends, as we all knew it had to, with his death. Not a noble or heroic death, either. Luthen dies because he was caught, because the ISB finally tracked down Axis, because he stabbed himself rather than be subjected to interrogation, and because his assistant, his daughter figure, had standing orders to ensure his death in such a case. That's not told to the audience, by the way. In no way, shape, or form do we ever hear Luthen tell Kleya what she is to do if he is captured and cannot be rescued. Andor trusts its audience to understand that Kleya, as she infiltrates the hospital using the various ruses, subterfuges, and distractions Luthen has taught her over the years, is acting, as she always has, according to her father figure's wishes. And what Luthen wished was that the cause must survive, regardless of the cost any given individual might pay. At the very least, Luthen is not a hypocrite. At the beginning of this final arc, he speaks with Lonnie, his ISB insider, who gives him news of the Death Star, and informs Luthen of his own plan to quit, to resign his post, and to flee Coruscant. Convinced that Lonnie's usefulness for the rebellion is expended, and his existence is now only a risk, Luthen eliminates that risk. Luthen would argue it was a necessary choice, however cruel and evil it might be. But he does not spare himself the same cruelty. Rule number 1, make him all in. Nobody is more important than the cause, not even himself. And that's the tragic thing about Luthen's philosophy. In seeking the good of everyone, it discards the good of someone, many someones, in fact. I've heard people call Andor's view of morality utilitarian, but it's really not. Its characters sometimes are, but the show itself does not endorse those views as morally upright. I mean, Luthen himself does not believe he is justified in his actions.
I'm damned for what I do.
So, since Andor knows that Luthen's actions are immoral, that he is an anti-hero rather than a straight-up good guy, it wouldn't be right for the show to give him a happy ending where he rides off into the sunset, blissful and free. The audience needs to see the price he pays, because this is Star Wars. Good and evil are not muddled or murky. Good men may cross the line, and bad guys may have noble intentions and act virtuously at times, but Andor never strayed from the black and white that Star Wars has always clung to. Its heroes and villains have not melded light and dark into an incomprehensible gray, but have points of white or black, polka dots if the visual imagery helps you, that stand out among their otherwise dominant color. Luthen may have had a backdrop of white, of moral justification, but he repeatedly dotted that clean sheet with every person he sacrificed so that the rebellion might live on. He did not fight the way he ought to have fought. He knew it, the audience knew it, and it became necessary for us to see the price he paid. So when writing your own static, unchanging, uncompromising anti-hero, keep this in mind. They should get what they deserve. What that is depends on your story's particular philosophy, but in a world such as Star Wars, a galaxy which reflects this fundamental truth of our world, that good will conquer evil, those who treat others as a mere means to an end, regardless of how noble that end is, should face severe consequences for their choices. Luthen died the way he lived. He was all in to the end, no matter what it cost him. His death was but a footnote in this war, his achievements largely discarded and forgotten by the rebel leaders, his sacrifice a pitiful and merciless one compared to the noble and heroic death of Cassian Andor, who was one of the few people to remember Luthen's quiet but enormously influential role in reshaping the galaxy. In the end, Luthen received his just desserts. Again, your character may not need to experience such dramatic cosmic justice, but it is crucial that you show your readers or viewers the cost of being an anti-hero. Many thanks to James from the Storytellers Guild for helping me make this video. If you liked his section, please go check out his channel. He's done a lot of videos on Andor and Star Wars in general, all of which are worth a watch. And if you like talking more about fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, and writing in general, please check out my Patreon. There you can join the Discord, you can get behind-the-scenes content, you can have your own work critiqued and analyzed by me, you can help shape the future of my channel, you can get sneak peeks at my upcoming book, and you can even work with me to design one of the characters in that book. I hope you're able to join. The link, of course, is in the description. And if you wanted more Luthen, specifically his epic monologue, click this video to watch my breakdown of his speech, as well as a few others from Andor's first season. Thank you for watching, God bless, and I will see you in the next video.